later. But I'll just leave a couple of minutes and then I will be letting folks in. Okay. Hopefully everyone's ready. I'm letting everyone in. Welcome everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Mariam Elkawaji. I'd like to welcome you to today's session. We would like to invite you just to start while we wait a couple minutes for others to join us, just to put your name and your organization and maybe what region in Alberta you're in at the moment, just in the chat box. This will just allow us to kind of welcome you and know who's in the room. So welcome everybody. We'll get started in just a couple of minutes. Welcome Colleen from Medicine Hat, Lyndall from Camrose. Just waiting a couple more minutes just to let folks arrive, and then we will get started shortly. Welcome, Gabrielle. Please feel welcome to put your name and your region and the organization that you volunteer or work with just in the chat box so we can all get to know each other. We have about, we're expecting between 20 and 30 folks to be joining us today. So welcome everyone. We'll get started in about a minute here. Welcome, Stephanie. We're just waiting for a few more people to join us. If you'd like to put just your name and your organization and region in the chat box, just so we know who's in the room, that would be wonderful. Okay. Welcome, everyone. It is about 1:30 now, so we will get started just with some housekeeping items and welcomes. And hopefully other folks will join us as we start that introduction. So again, welcome to the Elder Abuse Group presentation on the 4 elder abuse shelter models in Alberta. My name is Miriam Elgahawaji. I am with United Way of Calgary and Area as part of the CORE Alberta team. CORE stands for Collaborative Online Resources and Education. Hopefully most of you have been on the CORE platform and have found some resources that are relevant to your work. This platform is newly launched and it's intended to be a knowledge hub for community-based senior serving organizations, CBSS for short, and their allied agencies and individuals in Alberta. We are guided by the CBSS Leadership Council, who are 6 leaders in the senior sector in Alberta and provide strategic direction for this initiative. And this is a community, a by community for community initiative. And I'm just going to let a couple more folks in. So when you reach out to the Healthy Aging at calgaryunitedway.org email, it's myself or my colleague Liz Schweitzer, who some of you might already know, who are on the other side and are happy to support you with any questions. So it's my pleasure to welcome you, and please continue to just put your name and your region in the chat box, and as well as your organization, so that we become familiar with who's in the room. And in the spirit of reconciliation, we would like to acknowledge that we live, work, and play on Treaty 6, the traditional territory of Cree, Dene, Blackfoot, Nakota Sioux. We acknowledge this territory is home to the Métis settlements and Métis nations of Alberta, regions 2, 3, and 4. We honor and acknowledge the traditional Treaty 7 territory and oral practices of the Blackfoot Confederacy, Siksika, Kainai, and Piikani, and the Tsuut'ina and Ayarhe Nakota nations, and the Métis Nation Region 3, and all people who make their homes in Treaty 7 region of Southern Alberta. We also acknowledge Treaty 8 territory, the traditional and ancestral territory of the Cree and Dene. We acknowledge that this territory is also home of the Métis settlements and Métis Nation of Alberta, regions 1, 4, 5, and 6, with the historical Northwest Métis homeland. And we acknowledge the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit who have lived and cared for these lands for generations. We are grateful for the traditional knowledge keepers and elders who are still with us today, and those who have gone before us. We make this acknowledgement as an act of reconciliation and gratitude to those whose territory we reside in and are visiting. So welcome everyone again. And just to make sure that everyone has the capacity to participate and is comfortable, I just want to go through a couple of housekeeping pieces. We have set this up to offer interactivity, and we want everyone to be able to participate and jump on the mic when it's time to sort of have that community conversation. So feel free to turn on your video or leave it on the whole time. We ask that you just remain muted while the presenters are going through their presentations. We have about 20 people with us currently, and we might have a few more folks joining us. So again, just a reminder to please continue to be muted unless you would like to share something, and then we invite you to use the participation icon just by raising your hand, and then we will be able to call on you and to unmute yourself and share whatever you would like to share. So we will start by having the 4 presentations on the different shelter models, and then we will be inviting folks to jump on the mic and for us to have that community conversation. And we also want to draw your attention to the chat box. At any point, you can be putting questions in the chat box, or simply just if you have any comments or resources or things that you'd like to share, please feel free to use the chat box at any time. during the community conversation, you can also put your questions there, and we will have folks that will be supporting with facilitating those conversations. The question and answer.
Can you hear me?
Yes, hi, now we can hear you. Hello? Okay. So there will be folks moderating the chat box, as well as the just the Q&A portion of the session. So this session is being recorded, and we will be sharing the link to the session, as well as copies of the slide deck that you will see today with you in a follow-up email later. And if your organization has Zoom blocked, we acknowledge that some folks might be joining us over the phone. So if you have any issues, you are welcome to email healthyaging@calgaryunitedway.org, and we should be able to support you. And sorry for that long introduction. Right now, I would love to welcome our host, Chantal Audenbright, and she will be leading us through today's session.
Thank you, Miriam. Welcome, everybody. We're so glad that you could join us today for this important session. I think it's going to give us a lot of great information, and hopefully we'll be able to have some great dialogue afterwards with some question and answer. As Miriam mentioned, my name is Chantal Audenbright, and I'm with the Community Resource Worker for the City of Medicine Hat. I'm also currently undertaking a special projects coordinator for the Alberta Elder Abuse Awareness Council. And so today we're very pleased to be part of this group who's presenting on the 4 shelter models for Alberta. Miriam, do you want to just advance to the next slide there? I don't think I have the ability to, so hopefully she can advance us on the slides. Also, we just wanted to mention that November is Family Violence Month, and the theme for this year is Where to Turn. So there is a hashtag for that, and hopefully you were able to join on November 10th for the Where to Turn panel. If you weren't able to join us, there is a recorded presentation that's available through the core elder abuse group to be able to watch that and take a look back at that in case there's any information in there that you are interested in learning more about. You can also find out more information on the Alberta government website on the Family Violence Month at www.alberta.ca/family-violence-prevention. So hopefully you'll be able to do that, and we just wanted to recognize that we are still part of that month, and so this has kind of been part of the theme that we wanted to ensure that we had some different topics around so that people had more information during this important month. Miriam, are you able to hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Can you advance the slides a couple there?
Oh, are they delayed? Oh, I see.
They are for me, but is anyone else? You're still seeing the home screen?
Nope. So
Okay.
apologies, that was my bad.
No, that's okay. I think as part of, just before we get started today, it would be great if we could we have a couple of polls just to find out where people are from and where they're joining us from today. So Miriam, if you don't mind to launch the first poll. So we're just wondering what area you're joining us from today, whether it be from the north, the south, central, if you're finding that you're rural or urban. We invite you to submit that. Great, so it looks like we have a mix between the rural and urban, and we've got quite a few people joining us from the Edmonton and the Calgary zone, but also representation across the province, which is wonderful to see. Thank you all for taking part of that poll. I think we have one more at this time, just to get a sense of what organizations that you're coming from as well. I always find it's a nice way to be able to start just so we kind of have a sense of who one another is, and hopefully you've also had an opportunity to enter into the chat box what your name is and where you're joining us from so that we can kind of know who's all in the room with us as well. And thank you to Clarice for adding in the chat box those links so that people can go and check that information out. Great. So again, quite a few from the senior serving community, which is excellent since that's what CORE is meant to connect us through, and also some from healthcare and government and social services joining us as well. So thank you. So as mentioned, today we're going to have 4 different presentations. We have presenters that are joining us from Edmonton, Calgary, Red Deer, as well as Lethbridge, and they're going to be sharing about the different models that are set up for elder abuse shelter in their community. They're going to share a bit of information about how they've developed and how they operate. And then, as mentioned, we'll be able to have some time at the end to share questions and answers, as well as have a bit more discussion if there is desire to have that. So if you have questions, please feel free to pop them in the chat box. We're going to hold them until the end so that we can make sure that if there's information that is addressing it, that gets addressed, or that if there is a question that maybe pertains to all of our presenters, that they'll all have an opportunity to be able to respond to that. So I feel like this topic is such a timely topic because during Family Violence Month, it's often overlooked that elder abuse is really part of family violence, and it's an important piece that we feel we need to highlight. And you know, there is opportunity for people to be able to seek shelters when it's no longer safe for them to stay in their own home. But traditional women's shelter may not fit for everybody, especially some of our older adults. And so there are these different shelter models that exist to be able to specifically meet the needs of older adults experiencing elder abuse within our province. And we'd like to learn a little bit more about that. So we're lucky to have Michelle Markham with us from the Sage Seniors Association in Edmonton. We also have Katerina Zacharias, who is the manager of the Kirby Rotary Shelter in Calgary. We have Veronica Varvarook, who's the outreach coordinator at the Golden Circle Senior Resource Center in Red Deer. And Joanne Blinko is joining us. She's the case manager for the Lethbridge Elder Abuse Response Network in Lethbridge. So I'm not going to take any more time. We're actually going to get straight into this. And we're going to begin today with Michelle Markham. As mentioned, Michelle is with Sage Senior Association in Edmonton. And for the past 6 years, Michelle has worked as the Sage Seniors Association as the manager of the Senior Safe House. Michelle participates on the management committee of the Seniors Protection Partnership. She's a member of the Diverse Voices Conference Planning Committee and co-chair of the Elder Abuse Consultation team. She's recently become a member of both the Alberta Elder Abuse Awareness Council and the Canadian Network for the Prevention of Elder Abuse. Michelle is a registered social worker and holds a degree in Human Service Administration. And so in her free time, she thought she could join us today and be able to present on this. So welcome, Michelle, and thank you for joining us today and presenting on this important topic.
Thanks, Chantel. Miriam, I'm okay with you advancing the slides. I think that's beyond my cognitive abilities right now.
No problem, Michelle.
All right, so we'll get started. Oh, that jumped way far ahead. Okay. Interesting. All right, we're missing a couple of slides, but that's okay. I can start there. So the history is Edmonton established a coordinated community response to elder abuse in 1998. And this was after decades of talking about elder abuse and something needing to be done. And that coordinated response included a City of Edmonton social worker, a member of the Edmonton Police Service, and a coordinator with Catholic Social Services. The social worker with the City of Edmonton realized really quickly that, as Chantel mentioned, shelters were needed to provide safety for the older adult who is experiencing abuse when, you know, staying at home was no longer tenable, and that domestic violence shelters weren't necessarily appropriate. The homeless shelters certainly weren't appropriate. And so that left her with feeling that something needed to happen. So they employed a community development type of activity to figure out what would be the shelter model that would make the most sense. So using that model, there were focus groups, interested community organizations, and most importantly, older adults who wanted to be involved in creating something to provide safety for older adults needing shelter. There was the pilot project began in 1999. At that time, the vision was to have 2 suites available in 2 different buildings across Edmonton, because the thought was oh, perhaps the older adult would want to stay in their community. And that quickly became apparent that that wasn't necessarily a must-have. In fact, many of the older adults were saying, nope, I don't want to be in my community. I'd like to be somewhere else where I can feel safe. It also became difficult to manage. So that's where how Safe House currently exists came into being. We can, let's see what the next slide is, Miriam. There we go. If you want to see more about the, we did a whole big report on our model. And if you go to the SAGE website and find the Senior Safe House, you can download the whole report. It's 50 pages of actually really interesting reading, if I don't say so myself. So our model, we're a home-like setting within an apartment building. We are within an existing seniors building run by Greater Edmonton Foundation. It's a building that is owned by Alberta Seniors in Housing. Greater Edmonton Foundation manages the building, and we, being SAGE, we are the tenant. We have 7 suites. We bring in community service agencies to provide specialized supports. We work very closely with community geriatric psychiatry. We work closely with other community organizations that meet the needs of the older adult. We are very clear that we are not meant to be all things to everybody. We were also intentional about everybody being in their own self-contained suite, because what we were hearing from older adults was that the congregate living model just did not make sense for them. We provide meals, toiletries, we have light housekeeping once a week. Individual case coordination, of course, everybody comes in with a different set of needs, issues, challenges, what have you. Currently, we work very closely with the nurse practitioners. SAGE has a health services program that started a couple of years ago. Unfortunately, it looks like it's going to be ending the end of this year. So having nurse practitioners come in and provide that primary health care has been a huge, huge blessing. Home care, we will bring anybody into the shelter who needs the shelter, as long as supports can be put in place to help them be successful. So what I mean by that is if we have somebody who has physical health needs, things like needing to be transferred out of bed, that kind of thing, if home care is partnering with us and saying, yeah, we can provide all that support, then we will bring them into the shelter. As I mentioned, we work closely with geriatric psychiatry. We have a nurse who's assigned just to us, just works with our clients. We can get for the clients who it's appropriate for, we can get them hooked up really quite quickly with community geriatric psychiatry. Sadly, geriatric psychiatry has this age thing about 65 or above. So we take people 60 and above, and sometimes below 60. So that service is not something that they can access. We also, in non-COVID times, have an elder who comes in and facilitates talking circle twice a month. This elder was somebody who also has lived experience with being abused as an older adult. He came into our shelter and provides that much needed cultural safety and support and connection to ceremony. Edmonton has Edmonton's population is 4% Indigenous, and our shelter serves a disproportionate number of Indigenous seniors. Usually it's around 30% a year. We're super clear that we exist to fit the needs of the older adult. When we're assessing, doing our intakes, it's not about seeing if the person's a fit for us. We are seeing if we fit them. And that language is really important to me. They do not need to try and fit our circle. What it means is if we're not the right resource, then we will connect that older adult to the right resource. We are not staffed 24/7. We're staffed Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. We don't have that kind of funding to staff 24/7. So we need to know that our shelter can meet the safety needs of the older adult. If we have a woman, for example, who is in a high-risk domestic violence situation and with a high likelihood of being pursued by the alleged abuser, we can't take her because we would not be able to guarantee we could keep her safe, let alone the rest of the older adults in the building, because we're in an existing seniors building, as I mentioned. So then we would work with our partners at one of the domestic violence shelters where there is a higher level of security to keep her safe. if it was a senior male who was in that kind of circumstance, then we'd be calling up Kirby down in Calgary and seeing if they could house him. Next slide. So as I said, they must be able to live on their own or have the support available for the assistance they require, and need safe accommodation for this from the abuse. We only have 2 rules at the shelter. So if you're familiar at all with domestic violence shelters, sometimes the domestic violence shelters have a lot of rules. We have 2. 1, you cannot smoke in your suite. That's the landlord's rule. Thank goodness. Because the thought of somebody smoking in their bed and falling asleep and starting a fire is one of my biggest fears. Number 2, they have to be able to keep themselves in the shelter safe. So that does not mean if Mary needs a 6-pack of beer every day and she drinks a 6-pack of beer every day and goes to, does her own thing, that's fine, as long as she's not running up and down the hallway, banging on people's doors at midnight, or going out to the bar and bringing back random strangers, because that's jeopardizing the safety of the safe house. If Mary doesn't see it as a problem, it's not impeding her process in recovering from the abuse and getting all the work done that needs to get done for her to move on from the safe house, then we're fine with it. That's not to say that we wouldn't say, hey, Mary, is this a problem? But we're not going to push it. Our thought is leaving abuse and changing your life, that's enough on your plate. You don't need to necessarily assertively work on giving up an addiction. Next slide. So that's a view of what our space looks like, just your average, ordinary little apartment. Actually, they're quite sizable, the 1-bedrooms. We have 5 1-bedroom, 2 bachelor. One of the bachelors has been remodeled to accommodate a wheelchair. Although, fun fact, so the door to the bathroom is really wide to accommodate a wheelchair, but the door into the suite can't be widened. So yeah, I don't know how that works, but anyway. The other thing that's built, so this is a building that was built in the 70s. And all the bathrooms have bathtubs, which, since I've joined the lovely world of working with older adults, I've realized that bathtubs are a hazard and I can't stand them. So as they've done renovating in our suites, they've taken out the bathtubs and they're putting in showers all the way around, which is such a relief, thank goodness. If people want to cook for themselves, they can, for sure. They can get their groceries, whatever. We do provide food hampers weekly. If we have somebody who needs culturally specific food, so we had a woman who had only been in Canada for a couple of years. She was originally from India. She was not going to have, egg salad sandwiches and those kinds of things. We're just not going to meet her needs. So we would figure out what the things were that she'd like to have, and we would make that accommodation, of course, because it was about, this is what she needs to feel safe and comfortable in the safe house. So I learned all about how to make roti and things like that. We also all gained about 5 pounds when she was with us because she cooked for us. Next slide. So the staff team, we have the 2 coordinators who do the intake assessments, who work with the clients while they're in the safe house on that journey. We also have an intensive case management coordinator who splits her time between the Seniors Protection Partnerships, providing follow-up support for the intensive high-risk cases, and then she supports people on our wait list. So unlike other shelters, if an older adult phones us and says, I need safety, if we're full, we don't say, too bad we're full, good luck somewhere else. We still meet and do the assessment. We get them somewhere safe, whether that's in a hotel or in another shelter, and get the work started. So we've had people wait in the shelter, women's shelter in Camrose. We've had people wait in Red Deer, in Kirby, just Grand Prairie, all over the place until they can come and stay with us. Or if it's a man, wait in hotel, and the work starts. We also have a follow-up outreach coordinator who provides short-term support after the person has left the safe house, 3 months to 6 months generally. That depends on the circumstance again. We don't say, oh, this is 6 months, you're done. If there's stuff that still needs to be wrapped up and finalized, the goals from the safe house weren't all completed by the time the person moved out, they're still getting adjusted to their new community, she provides that support. And then there's me. We are all social workers. We also usually have a stable of students. social work, psychology, we've had art therapy. We had, until the U of A made a big change, occupational therapy students, a lot of occupational therapy students. They were wonderful. And I think, oh, nursing students as well. Next slide. So as I said, when we do the intake assessment, we're examining level of risk as well as getting the story. If we are getting a referral from another shelter, we don't necessarily need to dive in if the older adult's okay with them sharing what's happened to them. We don't, if they're okay with the shelter sharing with us the information they have, because of course we're not wanting to re-traumatize the person. So we just gather the information we need to assess the level of risk. When we have a wait list, which we don't right now, but when we have a wait list, so we've got 5 people on the wait list, we use that risk assessment to determine who comes in when, because somebody who's in a high risk circumstance that we can safely shelter, they would be at the top of the list, whereas somebody who's got a safe place to stay and it's a safe place where they can stay for, say, a month or what have you, maybe it's with a friend or another family member, then we would still work with them, but they wouldn't come into the shelter sooner than somebody else who's in higher risk. We use different tools in the shelter, and we use the tools that fit the need. So lots of social work tools, Ecomap, Genogram. Sometimes we use the tools for safety planning and not just for looking at resources. So an Ecomap is a really great tool to use as a safety planning, to make it really concrete for the older adult. Next slide. Our funder is now Community Social Services. They brought on board the senior shelters to align with funding the other shelters. We were funded for the longest time by Seniors in Housing. So this is a change that just happened a couple of years ago. We also, as I mentioned, work with the Seniors Protection Partnership. It was that team, that coordinated response, that gave birth to the Safe House. It's just their new name. And we work with the Seniors Abuse Helpline. So they are open 24/7. So an older adult can call anytime, and they will do a warm transfer to us if it's shelter that is needed. And then, of course, the Elder Abuse Consultation Team, which is a multi-agency case consult and collaboration team involving a variety of different players and organizations in Edmonton, from home care to Veterans Affairs, Geriatric Psychiatry, City of Edmonton. It's a really nice, well-rounded team. Next slide. And that's the contact information. I ended right on 15 minutes. That's me. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. That was excellent and very good timing. Okay, and as I mentioned, we'll hold the questions until the end. So if you're thinking of some though, and you don't want to lose them, feel free to type them in the chat box. But for now, we'll move on to our next presenter, which is Katerina Zacharias. Katerina is going to be presenting on the Kirby Rotary Shelter. And Katerina has worked as the manager of the Kirby Rotary Shelter since May 2019. Before working for Kirby Center, she was engaged in international community development work in Uganda. And prior to this work, she was working as a crisis counselor and outreach worker for the Northern Haven Support Society in the town of Slave Lake. So welcome, Katerina. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I've got my timer set, so I shouldn't go over time. So hello, everyone. As stated, my name is Katerina Zacharias. I'm the shelter manager of the Kirby shelter. I'm so happy to be presenting here along with the other presenters to share with you about my place of work, which I find very exciting. Next slide, please. Okay. So first I'm going to get into the history. So as to how the shelter model got started. So in 1973, Patricia Allen founded Kirby Center, a vision born from a lifelong dedication to improving the quality of life for seniors. After a number of years, Patricia organized a federally funded demonstration project to address violence in older adult families, which led to the construction of the Kirby Rotary Shelter for senior men and women, the first of its kind in Canada. In fact, Kirby Rotary House was the first purpose-built elder abuse shelter in all of North America, and it is owned by Kirby Center. So the photo seen here is from May 12, 1999, which was the grand opening of Kirby Rotary Shelter. And next I'm going to talk briefly about how Kirby acquired the property, or that land that you see the shelter sitting on, and built the shelter on, because it's quite interesting. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'm going to be talking about Olive Black. Going back a little further, we have the rather sweet story about a woman named Olive Black. Olive was a dedicated longtime member of Kirby Center, and for this reason developed a strong connection to Kirby Center staff and vice versa. As Olive's mobility decreased, Kirby staff began coordinating the delivery of hot meals and groceries in order to help her live comfortably in her home for as long as possible. And so I'm told by a senior staff member who personally knew the founder and Olive that Olive was the first Thrive client, Thrive being Kirby Center's grocery delivery program, which is still going strong today. Throughout the pandemic, Thrive has helped quite a few seniors to acquire food during this tough time. And so when Olive passed away, she left behind her estate, including the house pictured here. And what's interesting is you can see on her balcony there are those 4 different posts holding up the roof there. And that is leading us into the next slide. So remembering the contributions that brought Kirby Rotary Shelter to life. In the picture to the left there, you see the columns that were on her porch. So when they demolished the house, they kept those columns or pillars in remembrance of Olive. And that is located on our 2nd and 4th floor of the shelter, which are our residential floors, which is very sweet. For a long time, we didn't know where they came from, and you can't really tell, but the wall that's in between the 2 pillars, there's nothing there currently, but we thought, we've got to do something with this space. It's like a showcase, but we didn't know that the pillars themselves were being showcased. So it's quite a lovely story. Yeah, and then the photo to the right there, we have our donor wall of honor. Again, the pillars are displayed there, and that's actually on Kirby Center side. And yeah, there we are remembering the businesses and the community members who donated to make the Kirby shelter possible. Next slide, please. Okay, talking about the structure. So our shelter is located in downtown Calgary, with the C train being just a few steps away. We are connected to Kirby Center via a +15 walkway. And the building is a 4-story building with the main floor consisting of a common area, the 2nd floor being one of the residential floors. And I'll just outline the 2nd floor and the 4th floor, like as I mentioned, those are the residentials. They have the identical floor plan, and each floor contains 7 bedrooms and 7 washrooms, with 2 being full baths. So we have quite a capacity. The 3rd floor of the shelter contains the staff's offices, an intake area, shared kitchen, and the shared living room. And the shelter is equipped with a new elevator as of January of this year. We're really happy about that. We had to do way too many trips from the grocery store to the shelter, running up 3 floors. So it was great while it lasted, physical wise, but it was quite a strain, to be honest. So we have a new elevator, and so the clients are very happy about that as well. The shelter is also equipped with an emergency call system. So that means that we have pull cords located in every washroom and client room. And so we are a congregate living facility. And with the description I've already provided, you can see that the shelter was designed to operate as a senior congregate living facility. The environment is such that building community occurs naturally. Well, it's really unavoidable, to be honest. It's not without challenges. Pre-COVID, residents would take turns preparing meals if they were able, but currently one of our cooks from Kirby Center's cafeteria prepares 3 hot meals for residents every weekday. We have a cleaning company that comes during weekdays as well to maintain the cleanliness of the shelter. Currently, we have 9 funded beds and 1 emergency bed that is held for emergency intakes, such as a referral from the Elder Abuse Response Team, or ERT, of which we are a partner with CARIA and the CPS. In terms of our staffing model, and you see 3 of our, actually this is 2 of our staff and a practicum student pictured here. They're having a lot of fun. we currently have a team of 10, excluding myself. We have 5 full-time staff and 5 casual staff. And of the full-time staff, we have 2 night staff who alternate 4 nights on, 4 off. Then we have 2 caseworkers who alternate 4 days on, 4 days off, as well as 1 community caseworker who works weekdays Monday to Friday and is engaged in outreach activities. Then there is myself, the shelter manager, and I report to Director of Programs, Karen Whitman. Our team consists of 8 social workers and 3 staff who are informed with their backgrounds of psychology. So we're obviously, always wanting to improve as a team. And recently we have completed a 3-day intensive trauma-informed care training to ensure that we are aligning our approaches with the best practice models. I'm very proud of the team we currently have. It was a rough go during the onset of COVID. A lot of issues with staffing due to fears of, staff who lived at home with senior parents and things like that. But we've built it back up to our ideal, which is 10 in total. And it's a really, really good team that are extremely sensitive to the needs of our clients. And as well with that, as like I mentioned, there's a practicum student in the photo here. We generally have 2 full-time social work practicum students throughout the year, as well as a team of a group of nursing students from Mount Royal, and volunteers, lots of volunteers. Kirby runs with volunteer power. Next slide, please. So we are funded by the Homeless and Housing, as well as some personal donations. Annual operating budget from January to December is approximately $450,000. And I've just got a note about a challenge here as it does relate to funding. And that is that we have the physical capacity to house more seniors than what we have the funding for. So as I mentioned, we have 9 funded elder abuse beds, but each one of our 2nd and 4th residential floors contains 7 bedrooms, 3 of which being quite large and containing their own washrooms. So we could really house a lot more seniors if the funding was there, obviously for staffing and additional resources or needs. Next slide, please. Okay, about services. So our vision is a happy, healthy senior population, and our mission is to assist older people to live as well as possible for as long as possible as residents in the community. That is the general vision and mission of Kirby Center. And so to achieve this, I'm going to touch on these 3 key services that we provide. And the first is the Elder Abuse Resource Line. We call it the EARL. Attended 24/7, staff are trained to identify and appropriately respond to cases of elder abuse. So a trend that we have seen since the onset of COVID are a big increase in calls pertaining to that sort of, I guess the key being financial abuse perpetrated by an adult child who sometimes lives with their senior parents at home. It's not necessarily always the case. However, so we're getting this increase of calls from seniors saying that they're being financially abused by their children. And that we have seen as a spike since the onset of COVID. And often that financial abuse is co-occurring with emotional, psychological, and verbal abuse as well. So then we have our 3-month shelter stay program. And we didn't previously have a cap of the 3-month being the limit for the stay. But we noticed that without a limit, it was really kind of tricky for the clients to get motivated to work on their transitional plans and move forward from the shelter. It can get quite comfortable at the shelter. A lot of residents meet friends, the friendships last well beyond their stay at the shelter. And so we needed to implement a limit on stay. However, if there are barriers that prevent the resident from being able to move on within that 3 months, we do accept applications for extension. It just simply means that they need to apply, and it's it's a pretty basic application. So our social workers support residents as they work to secure independent living and address any previously unmet needs. And as mentioned, we have the 2 caseworkers, and each of these 2 caseworkers generally has a caseload of 4 to 5 clients, depending on if we're at capacity. Our caseworkers assist residents with individualized case management support. Clients and caseworkers meet once per a caseworker's 4-day rotation, generally for a few hours each afternoon. Over the course of the 3-month shelter program, caseworkers will support clients with a variety of subjects, including but not limited to budgeting support, financial assistance, securing subsidized housing or private, income tax or NOA help, transportation, arranging for home care supports, mental and physical well-being, addictions, self-care, hoarding education and support, employment, community engagement, volunteer, and more. Caseworkers will conduct risk assessments with all incoming residents and implement a safety plan as they discharge the shelter, especially if they are deciding to go back to their abusive situation. Let's check my time here. Okay. Yeah, especially if they're going back to their abusers, we really put an emphasis on that safety plan. So for programming in the shelter, our programming looks quite different than it did pre-COVID. For example, we have an art class instructor who drops off art supplies on a Thursday evening so that she can facilitate virtually on Friday morning. We're really lucky to have her. It's been a lifesaver throughout COVID, to be honest, because most of our programming, as you would expect, just dropped off. We have regular house meetings where residents discuss a range of topics. Usually it's conflict management because, as I said, the congregate living facility, it does not come easy. Sometimes I think about Michelle and Sage and look back at some of our conversations and I think, oh, okay, yeah, it's either, you know, pros and cons. Definitely we see the benefits of that congregate facility. It's quite sweet sometimes, often. And so right now we have a host of virtual class options. Residents sign out tablets during their stay with us and they connect to Kirby Center's virtual classes. There's a bunch of classes they can choose. It's yoga or gentle seated yoga, Zumba, language classes, expressive arts, men's shed, Tai Chi, and on. We do have 2 nutritionists who work to support our shelter residents. One who supports just with a general holistic approach to health and aging, and then the other whose focus is more about how, I guess, teaching residents how they should eat well if they are faced with disease or new illness and things like that. And that specialist nutritionist will work one-on-one with residents so that they don't obviously have to share their health condition with the rest of the community. And then we have a community caseworker. She's lovely. Her name is Kemi. She supports ex-shelter residents for up to 1 year post-shelter departure and providing individualized support. And she assists the caseworkers with discharge planning as well to assess for the residents' eligibility for various supports. So she assists with counseling, furniture, food hampers, welcome home hampers, WINs, referrals, and more. And through our outreach worker, we're able to stay in touch with some of the residents that we've gotten to know so closely over 3 months or more. And next slide, please. So to access services, everyone can learn more about how to access the Kirby Shelter services by calling our Elder Abuse Resource Line. If it turns out that a senior is not a fit for the shelter, we always offer to make a referral to our community caseworker mentioned previously. And I guess what I mean by not a fit is we do have a lot of calls where elder abuse is not present in the synopsis. And we knowing that, you know, in all of Calgary, we just have the 9 elder abuse beds. We really want to make sure that we stick to our mandate and serve those who we're asked to serve. Are expected to serve. And the other point is that because we are a congregate living facility, we need to make sure that the resident that comes in doesn't have behaviors that would harm other residents. So we do, like Sage, addictions and mental health issues, if they're manageable. Well, I'm not sure if that's exactly Sage's point being. We don't screen for addictions totally. We try to work with residents so that they can come in, they can sort out, heal from the abuse and move on. But if it comes to the point where the addictions become unmanageable, we do have to move the client somewhere where they can be best supported to handle that addiction, especially being that dealing with addictions during old age is much more difficult, much more complex than otherwise. So if a senior is a fit and wants to come into the shelter, we will schedule an IPA or an in-person assessment. During COVID, we started doing it over the phone. However, we really do prefer to meet the individual in person. And the reason for this is that we do need to screen for those very severe behavioral concerns. Okay. Since we are a communal congregate living facility, most of our decisions are made with the community in mind. We need to ensure that with all new intakes, the safety and security is number one. And I didn't mention earlier, but a part of the model is as well, is that when a person comes into the shelter, the first 21 days are free. And beyond that, they are charged 30% of their total monthly income, up to a maximum of $400 a month. And the reason for this is that after the 21 days, they're officially in the program. And beyond, when they're in the program, that's when we can start doing, landlord referrals and things like that, so that they have an easier transition and, well, better chances to acquire housing for sure. Next slide, please. So this is a photo of our third floor common area. To the right, you can see the entrance to the kitchen, and then at the back there's the plus 15 that attaches to Kirby Center. There's the residence. This photo was taken on the National Seniors Day, and they're doing some fun activities. You can see some of those red solo cups in the back, and they've got various art projects going. Yeah, this is where the meals are shared. This is where games are played and community is built. As I mentioned, it doesn't come without challenges. Personalities clash. It's just life. However, we do our best to handle whatever comes our way, and it is really a cool environment to work in. So I really do love my job. And this, for the most part, seniors will cite the congregate living facility as a positive experience that was, conducive to healing and things like that. We do our best with the congregate facility for sure. Next slide, please. And this is a picture of one of the residents' rooms. We had pre-COVID, we always had a system of ensuring that every resident had a roommate. We found that it helped people to get to know one another quicker. However, since COVID hit, we make sure that every client has their own room. And next slide, please. So that is the end, but before it's the end, I want to end with something very important. We do not work by ourselves. There are a lot of agencies and community members who contribute to the running of the shelter and to best meet the needs of every resident that we have in the shelter. And I'll give you a few examples. So for counseling, we connect to Calgary Counseling and Say Yes predominantly. For hygiene care, MC College is working with us to connect residents with free haircuts and pedicures. And this was actually set up by one of our practicum students. And for help with financial coaching, such as educating and budgeting, we connect our residents to volunteer experts at ATB and other banks. For legal support, we refer clients to Legal Aid and Kirby Center's legal support program. And our art therapy program, as I mentioned, is run by a retired art teacher from Calgary. And we reserve an emergency bed for Ert, who I mentioned we are a partner with, along with CPS and CARIA. So yeah, I just wanted to emphasize that we're community minded in the shelter. We have no choice, and we really try to emulate that in the city of Calgary as well, and that's why we're successful. Thank you.
Thank you, Katarina. That was wonderful. Our next presenter is going to be Veronica Varvarook, and she's the outreach coordinator at the Golden Circle Seniors Resource Center. She has been working at the center with older adults and persons with disabilities for 2 years. Her role as an outreach worker is to help individuals maintain independence in their homes and connect them with the needed services and supports. And she's going to speak to us about one of the newer shelters in Alberta that the Golden Circle has been a part of opening up. So welcome, Veronica. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Chantal. Hello, everybody, and thank you for having me here. So Central Alberta Elder Abuse Emergency Shelter is the project of Red Deer and Area Coordinated Community Response to Elder Abuse Committee. Seniors in Central Alberta suffer at the hands of their loved ones and their caregivers on a regular basis. And the Golden Circle regularly receives phone calls about elder abuse. Therefore, the Golden Circle Senior Resource Center developed a 24-hour elder abuse line to help in the areas of emergency housing and education and referrals. So Central Alberta Emergency Safe House is for older adults fleeing intergenerational abuse. So the shelter opened in September of 2017 with the help of funding from Red Deer Community and Royal LePage Network. Royal LePage was they raised money towards the emergency shelter, and also a lot of work was contributed by local tradesmen, such as a lot of pictures and other craft work. Also, the suite was remodeled into a 2-bedroom apartment. It used to be an office in the past. So how the shelter model started? It started with a conversation between two coordinators, coordinated community response members who started a discussion about the lack of elder abuse housing in Central Alberta and how to address the necessity of having shelter in our community and how to protect older adults from their offenders. So our partners and funders, so it was mainly a community project. Royal LePage was instrumental in this project. Also community, Bridges Community Living, its former Piper Creek Foundation was partner in project. And again, mainly funding was coming from community, not the government. The Safe House, the shelter is the place of refuge for local seniors who find themselves in abusive situations. There are 2 outreach workers working with the client, and to help, they are supporting them and helping them to meet their needs. This is how the shelter looks like. So again, it's a 2-bedroom apartment. There is a shared bathroom, shared kitchen, and a dining room, and a living room. So it's all furnished, has all the needed appliances, and it's located in one of the senior buildings. So when someone makes the move, it starts the whole ripple effect, potentially of family no longer engaging with the client. If leaving the home environment is not something the person is comfortable with, they are being educated on what supports are available and what options are to protect themselves. And it is really important for the client to reach out and get information. So the Safe House has an assessment process. It's only for intergenerational abuse, not domestic violence. And also risk assessment is being done to determine the risk of other tenants. So it is for individuals 65 plus. This is the criteria set by the landlord. Also, they have to be independent. It's for their own safety. They have to manage on their own, prepare meals, shower, and dress. So initial screening is done to determine if the client is a good match for the Safe House. If not, referrals to other community agencies will be provided. So if the person is not ready to leave the abusive situation, the social worker will prepare a safety plan. When taking someone into the Safe House, we have to ensure that the victim will be safe from the perpetrator, as there is no security in the Safe House. And also assessment for dementia and other mental health concerns is being done if any doubt arises. So this is the chart, how the process looks like. So we accept referrals from domestic abuse response team, from other service providers, and also the client can self-refer. So they call Helping Elder Abuse Reduction Hotline, or they can call directly the Golden Circle Senior Resource Center. And again, if they are not ready to leave the abusive situation, the social worker will help them prepare a safety plan. Then initial screening is done. So they so if they are ready to leave the Safe House, the situation, and move into the Safe House, and we will take them to the Safe House. Paperwork will be done, and they get the key. Also, we transport them. We have volunteer drivers who take them to the shelter. And if they are not ready to leave, or there is no space in the Safe House, we'll arrange safe housing at other locations if the room is available. And then, so they have to bring their personal belongings with them, important paperwork, their identification, bath equipment, and medication. So during the stay at the Safe House, transition planning with the person is being done, and once the individual is settled. And after that, we we are having a discussion with them on planning, like looking for permanent housing and trying to meet their needs. So what is being offered at the Safe House? So there is TV and telephone. They get access to telephone. Transportation is available if they have to go to medical appointments. Limited food available. Also, we do offer frozen meals prepared by the Golden Circle kitchen staff. So there is a menu of meals and they can choose whatever they like. They come frozen, but they are microwavable. So there is a microwave in the safe house, so they can use it. Also, escorted grocery shopping. The outreach worker or volunteer can go with them, and they can buy groceries and whatever they like. Also, assistance with various applications and forms if the need is, and they need help or they haven't done their taxes. We have a volunteer who helps them with applying for pensions and Alberta senior benefits. She does taxes, so all these services are free of charge and they can get help with that. So transition planning, and also if the need is, we do have home care that may be arranged. They can come to the Safe House and assist a client with personal care. And also I would like to mention that the 2-bedroom apartment worked well with having both male and female at the same time. They usually support each other through this journey, and it worked well having both at the same time. And again, it's here helping elder abuse reduction. It's our hotline, which is available to individuals. So it's available 24/7. The line is answered by the outreach staff at the Golden Circle. And the purpose of this hotline is to provide support and encouragement for victims, caregivers, and their loved ones, as well as provide referrals to appropriate services. Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Veronica. I think it's interesting to see some of the similarities that you guys have, being a smaller shelter compared with Kirby Center and with Sage, but also there's some uniquenesses and some similarities. So it'll be interesting to hear what the questions are afterwards, but thank you so much for your presentation. Our next presentation is going to be from Joanne Blinko. Joanne is with the Lethbridge Elder Abuse Response Network, and she's the case manager for Learn in Lethbridge, and she has been with them for over 3.5 years. She is a social worker with a history in child and family services, having worked with the ministry for over 30 years. For the first 15 years of her career, she was employed at Sifton Children's Center, where she worked with families whose children were in the residence, then with the families in community that were in an in-home setting as a support role serving Southern Alberta. For the remaining 15 years, she did child protection, which actually helped her to be able to facilitate doing intakes, investigation, and case management. And after leaving the ministry, she decided that she wanted to work with seniors and really found her passion for advocating against ageism and working in the area of elder abuse. So thank you so much, Joanne, for being willing to present to us today. You're the furthest south that we go for the day, and we look forward to what you have to present. So thank you and welcome.
Thank you, Chantel. So where I'm going to start is to give you a bit of information just about Learn, the program itself, before I get into the details of how we organize the Safe Suite in Southern Alberta. Next slide then. So one more. There, thank you. So Learn was founded in 2008, and it was founded by a police officer a member from the city of Lethbridge, Dawn, who was in community services, and Marlene, who was here at the senior center. And what they found is they were working with seniors in the community and through the senior center, and that there was a real need. So together they collectively came up with the idea that they needed to make application to be able to get a worker who could go out, do presentations on prevention and awareness. So that's kind of the evolution of where Learn started. As they were progressing along, they found that they actually needed someone who could be a case manager. And so at that point, it was an application to the Solgen Ministry to get a full-time case manager. So we've had one since 2012 for the last 8 years then. So presently, Learn, myself, partners with a city police officer. So there's a specific officer, Constable Jamie Kenyon, who's been assigned to work directly with Learn. And then Jamie and I are guided by the steering committee. And our steering committee is made up of the executive director from LSCO, the senior center where I'm housed, 3 social workers from here at LSCO, again, Jamie himself. There was a seniors mental health worker, and we've had some transition. So we're hoping for that evolution to come back. And we are in the process of looking for a geriatric nurse to also come on board. Consultations occur once every 2 weeks. We also have a support network where there are 23 different agencies, and we meet with these agencies every second month and talk about the support services that are needed in Lethbridge and community. So those 23 agencies all work with seniors in this particular community. We have a lawyer, we have the DVAC coordinator, Christine from the Sexual Assault Center, we have counseling through Lethbridge Family Services. And so there are network of supports in terms of a multidisciplinary team and providing services. So once we get into the Safe Suite, that's when we start pulling and drawing on some of those community partners. Okay, next one. So it was 2016 when the case manager was doing work with seniors in the community and found that the piece that was missing was that safe suite, or that place to be able to allow a senior to go sit back and think about the situation that was occurring and to have some collective thought for themselves about what they want to see happen from there. So after that decision was made, then Learn approached the city of Lethbridge and asked for funding for that crisis stabilization bed. So that's who our funding model now is through. When they approved that we would get some funding, we approached Green Acres, which is a seniors foundation here in Lethbridge, and asked them if they would provide a safe suite for us in amongst a lodge. So like the others have said, some have communal living. This safe suite that we have is within a lodge. So when it was 2018, that's when we had our first safe suite person go in who was a victim of elder abuse. We also are exploring with the YMCA, no, should be YWCA, to be able to do after-hour support for us. So I had been working with the manager, and unfortunately there was a changeover, then COVID hit, and so we're in the process of revamping what that's going to look like. Okay, next one. So this will go through what our partnership looks like with the city of Lethbridge through the Community Services Department. Next one. Like Red Deer, we're about a population of about 100,000. So one of the reasons that they looked at not keeping a constant safe suite bed is they asked for a yearly allocation of $25,000 that would be used as it was needed. So when we use up the $25,000, I have the ability to go back and ask for more. But at this point, I can put 1, 2, 3, or 4 seniors within the lodges that Green Acres provides for us. It just is dependent on that allocation of money in a general sense. So it doesn't have to be used, it can stay where it's at. Like I heard Katarina say, is we did put a cap on a ballpark about 60 days, but again, that's negotiable. So if we find that the senior is needing more days, then I can request an extension through the city of Lethbridge. The other plus for me is that Learn is now a case manager for SHIA, which is Social Housing in Action. So I get support with other people who are dealing with issues around housing, and that's with youth, teens, adults, and seniors. And I think that facilitates being able to bring that perspective to the whole team of people housing people across the age span. We have yearly funding, and that I'm expected to follow the standards as outlined by SHIA. So making sure that I have a grievance procedure, making sure that I have a safe suite admission form, going through each one of the housing standards that facilitates the funding, making sure that I am following those kinds of things. I provide stats to them. They offer different kinds of training, and we meet as a group once or twice a month to be able to look at issues around housing, from youth right to seniors. And again, as I said, depending on the circumstances of the senior's need, I can ask and have additional funds. So I hope that makes sense, that the pool of money is $25,000. So if I have 4 people in, I can use the money up all at one time, or it can be sporadic depending on what's needed. Okay, so the next slide takes a look at the partnership that we have with Green Acres here in Lethbridge. And they have been absolutely phenomenal in being able to support our seniors when they have gone into a safe suite. So I phoned Cindy, who's the admissions officer for Green Acres, and let her know that I have a senior. And usually by that time, I've worked with home care to determine if it's an SL2 or an SL3 requirement, because we do have the ability to place a senior at an SL3 level. And that is only one facility in town, but it does allow me to be able to do that. They're not going through the full process of admission to the lodge. They are going through the admission form only through Green Acres. And that's the only thing that I'm expected to provide to Cindy to be able to allow them to go into the safe suite. And I can phone in the morning and say, Cindy, I need a safe suite by the end of the day, or I need one, in a couple of days. I have an after hours ability to call one of the managers from Green Acres to be able to work with her to be able to see if we can do placement after hours. So for the Green Acres fee, we're charged $55 a day, and that facilitates a private suite, their own washroom, basic furniture, sheets, towels, full meals, weekly light housekeeping, and the opportunity for them to be involved in activities. So when a senior is being placed in a safe suite, they are not needing anything. So there's times where I would need to facilitate with the police officer to go into the senior's home and get their things out, but all they would need is their personal items. Seniors have said to me that they find this really nice because they don't have to want for anything. They move in a state of crisis often, and they're moving to be able to get all their basic needs met. Okay. So the bill comes then from Green Acres. It comes to me that looks at how many days has Lady X been in a particular facility, or gentleman Y been in a different facility. I mark off the days that goes through the senior center that I'm a part of, and then it go back to the city of Lethbridge to pay that along the way. I do a safe suite admission form that looks at the confidentiality between Learn and Green Acres. The seniors have given permission for me to have discussion with the manager, not going through the details of the abuse, but taking a look at who should come, who shouldn't be there, what kind of natural supports are in place, what are some of the issues, so that we can have the manager of that facility also be part of the support in making sure that the senior settles in well. We also then have to, as part of our protocol, do a grievance policy, because they're going into a lodge and because there might be things that would be questionable, or regardless of who they have that they encounter in terms of staff, there's a policy that's put in place as part of my protocol through the standards through the city of Lethbridge, so that the senior knows if something's working or not working, then that would be the protocol that they would follow. Green Acres is given the after hours number to the YW. So if there's an after hours issue or a weekend issue, then what would happen is the manager then would call to the Y, and they would be able to facilitate an after hours support at that time. The other thing that's really key at this point in time is that when I place someone or invite them to come into a safe suite, that's when our work with our senior systems navigator begins. Lethbridge just recently has pooled the FCSS money to involve 3 social workers from LSCO, a social worker from Norbridge, a social worker from Canadian Mental Health, 2 workers from Lethbridge Housing Authority, and Volunteer Lethbridge. So facilitating those other supports. I make a referral the moment that a senior is placed in a safe suite. Okay, next one. So the partner that I'm working, the partnership with the it should read YWCA. Next slide. So if something happens in the middle of the night and Lethbridge police are phoning our local women's shelter, they have been able to meet the police at the hospital. What I have found so far is if there are in the middle of the night calls, that often there are situations that have been stressful, that have involved some form of violence, that we're going to look at the protocol of them going to the hospital, being checked out to make sure that they're going to be okay, so that there isn't any issues, because they're going back to a lodge and we're going to try to make sure that all their needs are being met medically. The outreach worker from the Y will meet them at the hospital so that they have the support that they need to be able to do that. When a senior is discharged from the emergency department, in the morning, they'll hand it off to me the next morning. And again, as I said, in the event of someone already being admitted into the safe suite and a situation arises, they will call the YW over the weekend or in the evenings as part of the support. Okay, next one. One more, please. Thank you. So considering safe suite admission, so I'm the one who does the assessment. Coming from the background of child protection, I'm looking at the level of risk related to the danger and the safety that the senior is currently in. Generally, it's a discussion that we've had over a period of time. However, there have been specific moments where the risk assessment has determined that the need is so great that I make that invitation to the senior if they would be interested in coming into a safe suite. The factors that I explore are there natural supports? Can some of the risks be mitigated? What is the cognition in the current circumstances? the switch to moving into a safe suite, the potential trauma for them moving, the danger of the alleged offender. There's been points in time where there's been such an escalation of the alleged perpetrator that the discussion that I'm having with that senior is suggesting that the risk is extremely great, and we might not be able to mitigate the safety. And that's information I'm presenting to the senior. It also looks at the timing of the move, and pretty key is the purpose of the stay in the safe suite. So is this something where they need time away, or it might be just the weekend or a week, where it allows them the time to be able to collect their thoughts, to make decisions about the return, to do some safety planning and harm reduction for the return. It also could then move them towards, do they plan to move out of the current situation, or would they make the decision that they want to stay within the lodge? Like I said, part of the partnership is there with the police at all time. I do have discussion with seniors about whether or not they would be interested in making a charge towards the alleged perpetrator. And if there has been that question, Jamie, the police officer, and I have done that work collectively together. The other thing that's a plus for us is that when they move into a lodge, there's no information that's shared. So the senior is in the lodge and the manager is saying they're just trying it out. They're not sure if they're interested in if they want to stay, and their location is kept confidential. So the senior moving into that safe suite, which I don't know ahead of time, when I call Cindy, she said, I have availability at this lodge, that lodge, and this other lodge. And so the alleged perpetrator is not knowing where the senior has been placed. Okay. Next one. So the process that I do in terms of service planning, there's a lot of discussion that goes on with the senior at that point in time around their relationship with the alleged offender. It takes the opportunity for us to really focus on what has happened in the situation that they're a part of, and what they're removed from the pressures of being with the alleged offender if they're living together. And so when they're in that safe suite, it allows them some breathing time to be able to just think about what is the situation, what do I want, and where do I want to go from here. The other thing that I have found in the opportunity with seniors to be in a lodge facility is all of the seniors that I have invited to move there have said that they have found it useful, that they have talked about with others that lived experience, and that there has been discussion about other alternatives about how to manage a particular situation around things. Next slide. So the goal-directed stuff, planning that we do is all the elements that the senior might be experiencing as a part of the abuse. So that would mean that we would do going to the bank and setting up systems difference, looking at the alternative housing, looking at natural or cultural supports. The issues around the abuse are the pieces that I manage, whereas the senior systems navigators, they look after everything else. So they do the medical needs, accessing pensions. They may move them to become part of a senior center, so there's less isolation. Whatever the senior themselves identify is where they would take them in terms of that. And we do the physical transportation of that. So I take them to the bank. The senior systems navigator would take them to the counseling appointments. And this is where we would tap into the network of supports, where if a senior is interested in accessing counseling, I would phone Lethbridge Family Services, who are part of the network, explain the need for or the request from the senior to be involved in a particular situation and move from there. or we have the lawyer who is on the network, and she would assist in setting up a personal directive or a power of attorney. Okay. So what can the senior expect from the Safe Suite? And next one. Thank you. And some of the things that we've talked about is the suite is furnished, the basic necessities are there, the meals and recreational activities, there's privacy, there's no disclosure of location, confidentiality is maintained. We do work together, the senior systems navigator and myself, to support the senior in that situation. Again, discussion with the police officer if there are legal options that the senior is or isn't interested in. And then we take a look at what are the plans that they want to move forward. There's no pressures. If they need a week, 2 weeks, a month to just take the time to slow life down, that can be facilitated during that period of time. Okay, next one. The next stages of planning are contingent on what the senior decides. They are the ones who are guiding that path. So the senior systems navigator and myself will sit down and say, what would you like to do? Like, where would you like to go next? Would you like to remain at the lodge? Would you like to return home and we can safety plan and do some harm reduction? Or would you like to move out of that particular situation? Okay, and then my last slide includes some of the Safe Suite stats that we've looked at. So from 2018 to current, I've made 16 offers of seniors to move into the Safe Suite. 4 of those have declined, but we've done safety planning and some harm reduction when they've returned home. 2 people have stayed with extended family. 10 seniors have accessed the Safe Suite, 9 of which have remained in lodge living, and 1 has returned home. During the period of COVID, there have been no seniors who have accepted going into a Safe Suite. So that kind of overviews all of what Learn is about and what our Safe Suite is available in Lethbridge. Thank you then.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Joanne. That was excellent.
Thank you.
All of our presenters, thank you so much for your time and for sharing your knowledge and your experience with what your services are and what they provide. The next part is going to be around hearing from the other participants and just what questions they might have or things you'd like to know a bit more about. Feel free to raise your hand using the little option down here at the bottom, and then also you can type into the chat box if you have a question and don't feel comfortable raising your hand and talking, and we will have somebody to help kind of monitor that as well. Would anyone like to go first?
Chantel, it's Charlene.
Hi.
Hi. I can't find my little hand raising thing and I'm supposed to be monitoring that. But I have a question for Joanne, if I could. Joanne, you talked about that you have the 1 bed in your program. Is that typically, do you usually have someone in there all of the time? Like, what's the turnover typically for your program?
So Charlene, I can have as many people in a bed. It's not isolated or not specific to one senior in a bed. So there have been points over the last couple of years where I've had 3 seniors in Safe Suites, 3 different facilities at one time. So as long as I look at that pool of $25,000 and monitor how much money I'm using, I can do 3 at one time or 2 at one time. We've had 1 senior who has stayed in up until 4 months because of some specific needs. It just seems to ebb and flow, Charlene. I'm not seeing anything that would define for me a pattern. The plus for us here in Lethbridge is if we use the Safe Suite, then we use the dollars. If we don't need the Safe Suite, then we don't use the dollars. So it's not dependent on keeping one facility opening. We have the ability to use that pool of money as needed. Does that answer your question, Charlene?
Yeah, it absolutely does. And then the other question I have also is, do you, within your team or within your network, do you have someone, because you've mentioned that sometimes, and understandably so, sometimes the senior will elect to go back into the situation from which they came. Do you have someone within the network then that works with the perpetrator to try and mitigate some of the ongoing challenges or ongoing abuse that's taken place?
Yeah, Charlene, that's something that we just started. So like I was saying, that the FCSS dollars, there was a submission to the city of Lethbridge to pool the FCSS dollars. So Canadian Mental Health has a worker. We have 3 here. There's 1 at Norbridge. There's 2 at LHA. And then we have Volunteer Lethbridge that comes on board. And what we're able to do is that network of supports assist in being able to help the alleged perpetrator. So any of the files that I'm currently working on, even if they're not going into a safe suite, I make a referral to Heather, the team lead of that group of people. And then based on best fit, like if it's a housing issue for one of the alleged perpetrators, then she'd give it to the LHA support services. So we collectively kind of determine who would be best supporting that alleged offender in that particular situation. We also have access to hoarding here in Lethbridge. So I'm currently working with a senior where there's an issue with I think he's like about 35, young man who was living with his grandfather. I have one of the workers from Norbridge who the senior was attending that place, and the hoarding person was involved, and she provides that kind of support to that 35-year-old in terms of accessing our community supports.
Wow, that's wonderful. You guys have done a lot of great work. I think I'll have to have a side conversation with you because out of all of these models, I think that this one would make the most sense for our community or our region if we were able to pull it off. And it would be wonderful if we could. So thank you, Joanne.
You betcha.
Thank you. And just to follow up, to find the little raise your hand thing, it's under the participants. If you click on that tab, then it pops up and it kind of gives you the option of being able to raise your hand. So if you're interested in that. The other thing I just wanted to note was, I believe the session was advertised till 3 o'clock. That would be my mistake. I thought it was until 3:30. So I hope that you'll be able to stay with us. I think we'll do about 10 minutes of discussion here and questions and answers, and then we'll wrap up. So hopefully you'll be able to stay with us and be able to stay until the end when we wrap this up. But if there's anybody else with any questions, please feel free to raise your hand or to unmute yourself or type it into the chat box. And I'm not sure, Clarice, did we have anybody who had typed in any questions in the chat box earlier?
None so far that weren't unanswered.
Thank you.
I just have a question for, not really a question, more of a comment for Joanne. So excited about your model, and to what Charlene said, we get a lot of calls in Edmonton from service providers in remote communities who are just not sure. And, you know, while I will happily, you know, if the senior wants to come from Fort McMurray down to our shelter, absolutely, of course. But if they want to go back to their home community, it just makes your model makes so much sense, especially when there's smaller communities who aren't filling the lodge beds. Yeah, I hope they're reaching out to you.
I think, Michelle, that's what seems to make the difference, is because we're not as big. And so when you have a population of 100,000 and we don't have to use the bed on a regular basis, I haven't not yet used up my $25,000, but there is the option of making a difference for a senior in a rural area, because like I said, we're just not as big as Calgary and Edmonton to be able to facilitate a full-time safe suite.
And I don't know about Calgary, but for a lodge, if I have an older adult who needs a lodge, they're on a wait list for a while. There is no getting into a lodge right away here.
Since I don't see any hands up at the moment, I did have a question. I think I heard that, Joanne, there is no cost to the clients for the access to your services or to the ones in Lethbridge. And Kirby, after 21 days, there is a cost. But I was wondering to Sage as well as to the Golden Circle, if there's any cost to the client in accessing the shelters in your communities.
No, we don't have a cost. We're also, I don't think I mentioned, we're supposed to be, we're 60 days-ish. Like everybody else said, if the circumstances warrant staying longer, we just had a woman who was with us. She broke our record over 200 days. She had a super complex situation involving a probating of a will, missing in action executor, a bankruptcy, a derelict property, blah, blah, blah. So she stayed until we could get that all resolved. And the only time I've asked somebody to leave at 60 days is because they're not working with us. They're not coming along, and it's not something that happens suddenly either. There's been many conversations leading up to that.
And Veronica, could you comment on that as well?
There is no cost in Central Alberta Emergency Shelter either, and also I forgot to mention there is no timeline. The senior can stay as long as they wish. We had a client who stayed the longest. It was like 6 months until we found them permanent housing. So yeah, no cost and no timeline.
Great, thank you.
Can I ask another question, Chantal? I know that I get very chatty, but there's just so much good information here, and I would, it's certainly on our bucket list to create some sort of seniors temporary housing or shelter for older adults escaping abusive situations in our region. So my question is, and I'll just maybe start with Joanne again. Do you guys have, like, if you find that dementia does play a role in the individual situation, does that dictate a different outcome, or do you allow people who have those kinds of cognitive impairments to also take up residency in the safe suites?
It's based, Charlene, on how much the cognition is lacking. So if they're going into an SL2 or an SL3, they must be independent enough. I have worked with some of the lodge managers where there has been some impairments. They've stayed for a period of time. Facilitating getting home care involved has allowed for us to move them from the safe suite into something that's more appropriate. And the home care support team here have been pretty positive in being able to say, if I call them one day, the next day they've been able to come out and be able to do an assessment at the lodge. And if there's been times where there's been needed support, they will put support actually into the lodge until the more appropriate placement can occur.
Wow, that's absolutely amazing. Makes me envious of what you have going on there. It's truly remarkable. Michelle, does cognitive ability or cognitive impairment play a part in your guys' admission?
Yes and no. So as long as the person's able to keep themselves safe, then no, it wouldn't. Where it's been a challenge because we aren't staffed 24/7 is if somebody's a wander risk. So and then we could still have them in our shelter if home care is willing to play ball and come in and provide that support to make sure they're not wandering off. And home care has done that, but that is getting really challenging to get in place. Just depends on what's going on for home care, right, with budgets, etc. If we can't, we did have somebody who was a wander risk and who was unsafe, and unfortunately she ended up with a Form 10 admission to the Geriatric Psychiatry Hospital, which not ideal, but it was what was safe for her.
I just have a question from Colleen in the chat box here. The question is for Joanne. Do you have recommendations on the best way to approach lodges with this idea so that they see the win-win and want to partner with you?
Thank you. Colleen, like Medicine Hat, we're about the same size. And so part of that was the existing relationships that were already being built because we're housed out of a senior center. Rob, who's our executive director, is also on the board of directors for Green Acres. And so he took the initiative to speak to Donna, who truly is on board. She was one who is committed, who gets involved in our work with Alberta Elder Abuse Council. Like, she's just an invested lady. And I think if you wish to use her as an avenue of support, I know that Donna would be more than happy to do so. But part of it was with the existing relationships, because we're smaller in communities, where we could actually build on that ability to say, we're a senior center and this would make a difference. Green Acres here in Lethbridge is and does offer reduced rates of lodging. So when a senior has the ability to transition from the safe suite into lodging, it is done at a reduced cost because of some subsidies that Donna has applied from the provincial government for. Okay. I hope that's helpful, Colleen. And if you have any more questions, I'd be happy to chat with you after.
Absolutely is. Thank you, Joanne.
Okay.
I think we have time for about one more question. So if anybody has one that they would like to ask. Maybe I would like to ask, do any of you provide services or referrals for perpetrators, or do you specifically work with the victims of elder abuse?
So I'll jump in there. So when I make a referral to the senior systems navigators, they're the ones that provide support to the other family member. I'm sure everybody's made the observation that in order to make a difference for a senior in a situation of elder abuse, you need to support the perpetrator. The senior is so focused on making sure that things do not get difficult for their son, daughter, grandchild, that if we can provide some of those supports through housing, through mental health support, through addiction support, they jump on those things pretty quickly. That's at least from my experience.
We do not. But in saying that, if the older adult is saying, I want my, if it's the adult child and they're wanting that child connected to supports, we would definitely guide the senior and provide those resources for the senior to give to the older adult or their adult child. Part of the problem, and Chantal and I talked about this earlier, is the silos that exist in Edmonton. So in terms of services like ours that are broad for adults who are dealing with mental health issues and addictions and what have you, there's lots of boundaries for those services. So either you live in the inner city, or you're homeless, or you live here, you're a parent yourself. So it can be challenging, and that's the piece that's missing, I think, in Edmonton, is having colleagues who are doing a similar role, but with those older adults who can navigate those systems.
So for Kirby Center, it really depends. A year and a half ago, we had a policy that clients had to adhere to, which was that they were not allowed to, it was prohibited for them to stay in touch with their abuser. However, we realized, that doesn't always make sense, especially since a lot of elder abuse is perpetrated by family. It's not, I don't know. We felt it was not the best policy because maybe family rehabilitation is the solution, or maybe the family member is just targeting them because they've lost a job, or we see this a lot during COVID, right? The financial abuse against a senior parent. And with that, our outreach worker works very closely with the CPS and through a DCRT initiative, that's with the CPS, she works very closely and she does support perpetrators. So for us now, even caseworkers will work with the family member if they are the abuser, especially if, because we've been seeing a lot of cases related to maybe a senior who's not from Canada. They were sponsored by their adult children to move to Canada, help out with childcare, things like that. That situation goes awry. And then we do need to stay in touch with that adult child because they're sponsoring the senior in our shelter. So it really depends.
Here in Central Alberta, the Safe House, in my experience, we haven't had an opportunity to support perpetrators since the senior is not allowed to keep in touch with their abuser. But I believe if the need is, we can definitely support them and provide information and referrals to needed services. So yeah, I would say yes.
Great, thank you. Miriam, if you want to go to the next slide. Just to wrap up, we thought we would also mention about our next presentation that's going to be happening on CORE, and we hope that you'll be able to join us, which is going to be happening on December the 10th, and it's on compassion fatigue training. This is going to be an excellent presentation, I believe, and I think it's very timely. And compassion fatigue is often called the cost of caring. Providing support for older adults experiencing elder abuse or trauma can take its toll on caregivers and service providers. Secondary trauma can be very high. We invite you to join us in this informative session sponsored by the Alberta Elder Abuse Awareness Council to gain a greater awareness of compassion fatigue, learn introductory skills to mitigate its effects, and create a plan for personal self-care and organizational support. It's going to be presented by Tim Neubauer, who's a mental health expert with 28 years of experience, both personally and professionally, including mental health training development in rural communities and workplaces. And he's facilitated workshops across Alberta on psychological health and safety and the promotion of mental health. So I think just given the year that we've all had, being able to not only do the important work that we do in working with clients who are dealing with these really huge issues and sometimes taking some of those pieces on ourselves, but I think also with COVID and the effects that have had on us both personally and professionally, I think it's really timely and hopefully something that you will be interested in joining us so that we make sure that we're taking care of ourselves so that we can continue to care for those who we work with in our field. So thank you everybody for joining us. And I would say thank you so much to our presenters for joining us today and presenting this important information. This recording will be put onto the CORE website as well. We will be sending out an email that has a survey in it. So please make sure that you click on the survey. It's a short survey, but it helps us to be able to provide feedback and input into future events. And we thank you for your time today, and we hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Just going to stop the recording.